welcome to the 67th episode of Redeeming the Time. Happy birthday to you.
Move on.
We're not going to move on. I'm going to give you a gift.
Oh, yeah?
From one of your favorite restaurants.
Ah, nice. That's why you were out there.
That is why I was out there. I also got him some Holtman donuts because it was right next to Chewy's Stay Crispy. I think that's what it says.
That's a cool shirt.
But that's your color. You have probably...
I've got about 3 million shirts in this color, yeah.
45 shirts in that color.
Well, thank you. That's awesome. My second restaurant T-shirt. I have one from Martin's Barbecue in Nashville as well.
Yeah, that one's worth it.
Yeah.
I don't know. We hate Chewy's so much. I can't do Chewy. We haven't had it in forever though.
You haven't?
I haven't.
Yeah. The whole we thing probably was.
Yeah.
You don't know
Callie
when I've
and
had
yeah,
it.
That's true. Callie and I have not had it in forever.
Yeah, we had it last night for dinner.
Makes sense.
I hadn't been there for months, but weeks.
Well, you found another Mexican restaurant that you like.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
that's much closer. Yeah. So, something that both of us like is competition, no matter what it is. And so, over the last, when I was a kid, I was into the main three. Really, I was never into hockey, but it was baseball, basketball.
Yeah, I don't
football.
Even know all the rules of hockey.
And then I got into golf, and then as I've gotten older, I've gotten into more nicher sports.
Nicher? I think you made up a word.
More niche sports as I have gotten older, and to the point where
Is this because you can't do the other sports anymore?
I think it's the fact that you can do
most of them by yourself.
By myself,
yeah.
I can go out and play disc golf by myself and just enjoy nature.
Yeah,
that's awesome. You can't just go and play basketball
enjoying
by
nature
yourself.
as you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a hike.
Okay, sure.
I walked 2.5 miles the other day at Lydewild.
Okay.
It's a hike, and you got a backpack if you're nerdy like me. But I realized this about 5 years ago when my buddy Joe and I were watched. We've done this a few times with a few different sports, but we watched drone racing for like 3 hours.
3 hours? I've watched it for 5 minutes before.
And they were in a stadium, and we were.
Please tell me you didn't buy a hat or something.
No, we didn't buy it
for the leading team.
And we didn't get into it after that, but we did watch it for like 3 hours. And now
3 hours of drone racing?
Yeah, they were going through the stadium going at like 50, 60 miles per hour.
Did they have like the Oculus things on? Yeah.
And some would hit the wall and it would just be like,
oh yeah, just destroy it.
Yeah.
They're like the little hover ones about that big, right?
Yeah. They're super fast. So, with that being said, we had a conversation yesterday with you and I, with Hannah and Julie. And so I asked them, what should we talk about on the podcast? And they were like, well, you just had a conversation yesterday about these random sports. So we were talking about whirly ball. What is whirly ball, Dad?
Okay, so whirly ball started, we're talking mid-90s probably. At least that's when it hit our radar. There used to be one in Columbus. There's one in Cleveland and one in Chicago. So imagine a basketball court and the two goals, but instead of a hoop, there's a hole in the backboard. And the floor is made of metal. And and here's where it gets weird.
You have
a track ball.
Yeah,
you've got a track ball, a racket, those little plastic track ball rackets, and the track ball itself. It's a little heavier than that, I think.
It's bigger.
If I remember. Yeah, a little bigger than that as well. So you can't launch it like all the way down the court type thing. Now here's where it goes different. You are, not walking. You're in a
bumper car.
A Dodge bumper car. Dodge 'em type thing. Yeah, bumper car. And you are two teams against each other, and you were scooping this thing, passing it to each other, and you got to hit it in that
Hitting
hole.
each other, yeah.
And I mean, it's like the perfect thing to break an arm, because
yeah.
because if you miss it, you're scooping it down there, and another bumper car could come and cram your hand, and you've got one, like, between your knees is this one contraption to spin it. Your knees are busted up, and like the backboard is about this far off the wall. So if you're taking a line drive toward it, you've got the ball, no one to pass it to, and you're going for the goal. You basically got to sacrifice the body and hit it right then, and boom, you're hitting the wall. And the games are like, I don't remember.
I don't really
5
remember.
or 10 minutes long. Yeah. Oh man, that was fun. We took the youth group several times. Took the college class. We took that a mission trip years ago. You were a kid, up to Cleveland. We were helping a church plant up in Cleveland. Do you even remember that?
I do.
And we went to Whirly Ball that night and had some fun. So yeah, they have leagues and all kinds of stuff like. I don't know if it'd stay in business in Cincinnati or not. I mean, the insurance cost has to be just outrageous.
Yeah, you definitely got to sign a waiver.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, you're signing a waiver just to walk in the place.
So that's one of them. That one also reminds me of volleyball, because it's very similar in name, volleyball.
Yeah, that's not a niche thing. That's just something you do when you're doing an overnighter at the YMCA.
That is a niche thing, 100%.
It's at a
100%.
So racquetball court, volleyball basically.
Yeah, and so you can hit it off the walls.
You can hit it off the walls.
Yeah,
that's the cool part about it.
Yeah, it's really cool. So that brings me to paddle or paddle. Basically, it is the same scoring of. It is huge in Europe. Finland. I remember when we went to Finland, I saw a paddle court. I was like, oh, it's pickleball. No, it's paddle.
Oh, you can play off the walls?
Yeah.
And, I have seen that before.
It's a smaller tennis court. It's like a turf floor. The paddle has holes in it. Super cushioned paddle. The ball is pretty cushioned, and it's basically racquetball going against each other. So it's more about playing chess than hitting as hard as you possibly can.
Racquetball is going to come back eventually. That's too cool of a sport to die off, because it's pretty much dead.
Yeah.
That'll come back.
Yeah.
Now, what are the Terrell boys? What do they play? They play squash, don't they?
I don't know if they do, but there's a bunch of kids in our youth group that play squash. Like,
yeah. Now that's
so
an
when
old
we played
sport.
So when we played wiffle ball, they were going one-handed, and all the squash players were going one-handed. We were like, "What are you doing?" It's sure enough.
Oh no! Some of the young ladies from the Ethiopian church play squash. That's right.
So we were like, "Are they gonna hit?" And they were just cranking home runs. It was awesome.
That's
so. What was the game that we just looked at?
It's called. It's German. It's Faustball, but it's called fistball. So imagine the same number of players for volleyball, but instead of a volleyball court, it's a full field.
Yeah, with no net.
No, there's a net. Well, there's a line. It has to go over the line. Yeah. And you still get the 3 hits, but it can hit the ground each time, and you can hit it up in the air, and you can spike it. It looked like it would take a long time. Now, we saw one. We took a trip last year real quick down to Miami. Frontier had like one of those $19 one-way flights, and it's like, we're doing it. So we flew right after the doctor gave me the okay after the heart surgery. We went down there. We saw the Starkeys, and we went to whatever the famous beach is there in Miami, and they had this ping pong table that was sloped.
Yeah.
And they were playing soccer. I don't know what it's called.
I don't know what it's called either, but you're playing ping pong, but you're kicking the ball. You're doing all the soccer
with your head,
moves.
all the soccer
you can't
moves,
use your hand.
Going over the. Now that was pretty random.
Extremely hard. We also Joe and I.
If you're not good at soccer, you're gonna look like an idiot out there.
Joe and I we went to St. Kitts and we learned how to play cricket. So I want to try cricket.
Ooh.
That's not a niche sport. It's niche in
For
the
the
United States, but
for
it's
the rest of the world, it's like
the
top
second
two.
most
Yeah.
popular. Behind,
I don't even know all the
behind.
rules for that.
Yeah,
Sticky wicket.
yeah. Then there's the little backyard games too, but we're running out of time, so might be.
What's your
talking about
favorite
those. Spike ball.
spike ball? I like.
If I cornhole is my favorite if I don't want to sweat, but even sometimes I sweat in
Who
that.
doesn't sweat playing cornhole?
It's a lot different
If
than
you're
spike ball though.
If you're outside,
Spike ball,
yeah,
I am
okay,
drenched.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
I'm
you're
diving on the
diving
ground.
and jump.
I've got sand all over. Yeah.
Yeah, my new favorite one when
Pretty sure most people don't sweat when playing cornhole though.
Do you sweat playing cornhole outside?
I think that's just you and I.
And the fellowship hall, you're like sweating.
I think that's just a you and I thing.
No,
I don't
no.
think most people sweat playing cornhole.
Any man is sweating as he plays cornhole.
Falling's pretty fun.
Bowling.
It's
Oh,
the
what is that?
football
I didn't-
throwing with the 10 bowling pins.
I've
We
not
have
played
one
that
there.
yet.
That's
yeah.
really fun. You think it's really easy, but you're not used to throwing a ball that low accurately.
I'd like to play that one where it's golf, but you're kicking a ball.
Oh,
That with
we did
the holes like this.
we
big.
did that last year with the summer trip for the teens. That was one of our activities.
Okay.
What is that called? Foot golf.
Foot golf. And
Yeah.
then, okay, my last one is my favorite in the yard game now is bocce ball.
Yeah, bocce's fun.
I've
That is fun.
come to love bocce ball. You can play it on the beach. You can play it on the grass. You cannot play it very well in the fellowship hall. We've done
Doesn't
it.
stop.
It doesn't stop. Yeah. So, wow. So that was a interesting topic
There's
for
even
everybody.
more.
What's your favorite random sport that's not one of the big three?
Because at the base,
Big
it's just
four.
competition,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's just figuring out a random way
Uh,
to
yeah,
have
one that-
competition.
Some random sports are good ones to have fellowship where you can talk and you're not. You might
Bocce.
be sweating a little bit, like cornhole, but you can still talk. Others, like spike ball, you're sweating and
Oh, it's-
diving and getting
not a leisure sport.
getting hurt. So, all right, let's get into it. Today we are in 1 Samuel chapter 18. We got it fixed in the bulletin for this week. So she still had us down in Philippians, and I kept forgetting to tell her. It's
Yeah.
my fault. I didn't tell her. So now it should say David's life or the life of David or something like that. Because that's really what we're doing. More than for Samuel, we're talking about the early life of King David. And we just finished chapter 17, the famous chapter of David and Goliath. And we are immediately into chapter 18. How do we know it's immediately? Because chapter 18 says, "And it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul," so David had just talked to him, he said, "I am a servant of Jesse the Bethlehemite." Well, it says, "And the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul." And then verse 3, "Then Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him and gave it to David, and his garments, even to his sword and to his bow and to his girdle." So some very interesting things there as we see this. Keep going.
Yeah,
You got
it's
something
just
you want to say?
you'll see throughout. This is the setup of. This is the first time. This is the first mention of Jonathan, right?
No. Jonathan had that one situation
yeah.
before, right?
But the first mention of them being together.
Correct.
And so we will see throughout the rest that Jonathan did love him as his own soul, and this bond between these two were the best of friends. They were so close that they were willing to risk their lives for each other.
Yeah, some have tried to make this,
Woke.
yeah, just evil.
Yeah.
That's not what this is. I find this, it's a very interesting phrase, though, that Jonathan's soul, not his heart, his soul was knit to David. This had to be of God. It doesn't tell us specifically that God caused this, but we have two young men that are both surrendered to God We see all through the book of Psalms when David was a young man. We read about it earlier about what kind of man David was. We read about earlier about what type of man Jonathan was. They were men that believed in God, that he was the God of Israel, that that everything relied on God. And now we see these two men come together, and God causes Jonathan's heart to be knit to David. It never says the opposite of that. And this is where I think this was caused by God, or God brought these two men together. They don't know this yet. Jonathan could have been bitter toward David. I mean, if he'd seen all the situation, he would have rightfully been bitter at who David becomes, but he doesn't. God gives it, he has a heartbeat for him. And he could have rightfully been bitter toward his dad, because it's his dad's fault that he's not going to become king. Does he fully realize it at this point? I don't think so. But we see this situation, and there's a lot to be said about Jonathan here. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had a friend that is that close, but somebody that God has brought into your life that you needed. I prayed all the time when they were kids. I still pray for them this way, that God would put the right people in their life and remove the wrong people from their life. I don't know the names of those people, but God does. Mm-hmm. And that's an important prayer. And we see this occurs here. Jonathan, he fulfilled God's designed role for him. He doesn't know this yet. He's never going to, he's never going to be the bus driver. All right. He's never going to be the main guy in charge, but he is going to be the support that David needed for David to become and to do the things that God had for him. All through the Bible, we see people like, Aquila and Priscilla. They're not the main leaders. But they support the Apostle Paul. They support Apollos. They're always in that role of building and lifting and equipping other people. Yeah. Lydia, she becomes that for Paul as well. She, and as we read about the book of Philippians, you can guarantee most of that money was probably coming from her. And I say that because, you're going to find this more and more as you continue on in ministry, is there's far more need for people that equip and people that carry out the work of the Lord than there are leaders. There's only so many spots for a leader, but there's thousands upon thousands of spots for each and every one of us to carry that on. I look at this for missionaries. We're good friends with certain missionaries, and they're carrying out a great work. We're not there, but we can equip them. We can provide resources for them. We can do legwork for them. And, that type of, and that's really what we see here in Jonathan. He's an amazing guy. Yeah. And that whole, his heart, his soul knit to David, you can't get by that. Mm-hmm. So
then it goes on, and we see this weird situation that I've always been confused on why nobody has done a show on it until this upcoming, because it does, if you look at it, it's one of those things where what's going on, but obviously because you're reading it.
Yeah, you're reading
thousands of years later.
There's a cartoon coming out on the life of David as well. I just saw a commercial for it this week. Yeah,
gotcha. But you see, and David went out whithersoever Saul sent him, and behaved himself wisely. Now that phrase there shows up over and over in this chapter.
Over and over, yeah.
And you see the character of David. So you see the situation. We know what situation. Saul is obviously on the decline of his life. David was just anointed, just killed Goliath, and he's becoming the king. And you have these two people, Saul and David, so close to each other, and it's just that weird
dynamic that's going on there. Dynamic.
Yeah. And Saul set him over the men of war, and was accepted in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. And so you see that Saul is put him in charge of stuff. He
Yes.
went from just the guy playing the harp for him to now you're in charge of this stuff, and I'm your boss.
Right. So how much time's gone through here? Almost none, right?
Yeah.
So he's still a young man.
Mm-hmm.
And verse 5 there, yeah. So he had to be wise. He doesn't know this, but he, as this very young man being put over known soldiers, it tells us in that verse, he was set over the men of war, not just regular dudes. He's over soldiers, and he's this kid. And it says he was accepted in the sight of all the people and the sight of Saul's servants. So that's where we see this behaving himself wisely. He could have lost the soldiers quickly. If he did that, he was done. On the other side, he could have overstepped and been, I got to prove myself, and that thing, and he could have done that really easily as well. So he's walking this fine line of keeping God's wisdom to walk that balance, and he does. I mean, that's the incredible part of it. And so when he was accepted, that's the term there. And this wasn't like I'm trying to earn. I'm doing anything I can so that people won't hate me. This is no. He was accepted as this is a leader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Verse 6, then it said, and it came to pass as they came when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistines that the women came out, and then it goes into verse 7, and the women answered one another as they played and said, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very wroth. Yeah. And the saying displeased him, and he had said, and then he goes on, and it talks about how there's the switch.
Yeah.
He just put him ahead of the men of war. He's accepted. He's this guy that everyone's looking at. If everyone's looking at him, though, who are they not looking at anymore?
Yeah.
They're not
the
looking
guy
at
that was a head taller than everybody else. He's always been looked at.
Now they're looking at the shepherd.
And now he's been this king for some 30 years at this point, or probably 25 to 26 years at this point. So David's new. Think about this in our society. We always have the new shiny star, the new rock star, or the new actor, or the new sports person, and they're it. They're the it person for a while. David's new. He's young. Tells us he's handsome, comely. He's handsome. He's winning.
Mm-hmm.
He's a victor in everything he says. He's famous. He's the most famous guy in Israel at the time.
Yeah.
And the looks and all of that.
The women singing to him. Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to sing to him. It's just like the little girls fainting over some boy band. It's just, it was going to naturally happen.
Yeah. And in verse 9, this is where, Saul eyed David from that day and forward. So he has his eye on him. And as you read throughout 10 through 16, we can go over some of this, but then you see him really get mad.
Yeah.
And start to try and to kill him.
So. Verses 6 through 9 there, that's the turning point for him. We've already seen in past chapters where Samuel said the kingdom has been rent from you, and because he didn't obey, and now we get in verses 12 through 10 through 11. The evil spirit comes back on Saul. David's playing for him again, not a soldier, and he throws a javelin at him. But apparently he does it twice because it says David avoided out of his presence twice. I don't know if he's got like a box of spears there. He just keeps throwing.
Well, yeah, and he's so mad that it says that he wants to pin him against the wall with the javelin.
Yeah.
Like that's it. It wasn't just mad you just threw it. No, he is trying to get him.
Yeah, javelins. We're not throwing a little stick here. We're throwing daggers. I mean these
big javelin.
You're killing people on the battlefield with something like this. So this is.
But then in verse 12, and Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him and was departed from Saul.
Yeah. So we have a change here. First he was wroth and he eyed him. David behaved himself wisely, and now we see this word, fear. Saul knows God. It tells us here he knows God is with David, and that brings fear into his life. So what's he do? He removes him. Verse 13, therefore Saul removed him from him and made him his captain over 1,000. So this kid is now a captain over 1,000, and he went out and came in before the people. So his first thought is, get him out of my presence, out of sight, out of mind.
Didn't work.
The people aren't going to hear about him anymore, that kind of thing. So he sends him out.
Yeah, and putting him in charge, like, war was...
Yeah.
I mean, the odds of him...
Who knows? Yeah,
who knows what would have happened.
So what happens?
And David behaved himself wisely in all his ways. The Lord was with him. And when Saul saw that he behaved himself very wisely...
Very wisely now.
Very wisely. He was afraid of him.
So now he's like, okay, he was even more afraid because he's done this. He put him out. That didn't work. So now verse 17, he has a different strategy. A strategy that we will see David use actually much later in his life. But David's like, all right, by putting him out didn't work. Now I'm going to try to get him killed, but not by my hands.
Yeah.
So Saul said to David, behold, my elder daughter, Merab, her will I give thee to wife. He's not being truthful here. Only be thou valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles. He doesn't care. He's just saying this. For he said, let my hand be upon him, and let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. Let not my hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. And so he does that, and he puts him into battle. And what happens?
Well, David defeats him.
Yeah, David defeats him.
And his men. And
he gives that daughter
to somebody else.
So he finds out that his daughter...
Michael, I don't know. That name
I've always
again.
said Michael, but people say all kinds of ways
I
of
gotta
pronouncing
look
it.
that up.
That she loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. So, good old dad Saul, he's going to use his daughter's crush and heart beat against David.
I will give him her, that she may be a snare to him.
He uses his daughter's emotions as bait for David.
You see the effects of these self-centered and the conceited here, where he gets so caught up in himself that nothing else matters but getting rid of his enemy.
Right.
This one guy. And now he's affecting not just himself and that guy, but it's affecting everyone, his family, the whole nation.
That's right.
And
we do that
picture
too.
Perfect thing.
And we do that too, on a smaller degree, but we do. Now, I would say, monarchs have constantly, through time, used their daughters for political pawns. So this isn't the first time someone's done this, or it definitely isn't the last time. And if you've watched any period piece, you'll always see them using, I'm England, and we need an alliance with Spain or France. So I'll marry my daughter, who's 8 years old, off to this crazy person. And that happens a lot. When you get to verse 23, I think that's a interesting one. I think we might have explained this last year. But, and Saul's servants spake those words into the ears of David, like, it's okay, if you have a dowry, if you don't have a dowry, you can, the king wants you to, basically to have the daughter, and that type of thing, and he'll give you a way to do this, and he's all excited about that, and gives them, if you kill 100 Philistines and bring back a souvenir of that, I'll let you read that on your own, and he winds up killing 200 and bringing that back. So this is what's going on there. He feels he's a poor man, doesn't have a dowry. We don't do dowries anymore, but basically, what will you give me for my daughter? 2 camels and 50 dancing women.
Trade you 2 sheep for an oar.
For an oar? Okay.
It's Catan.
Oh, okay. Or for wheat, or...
Yeah, wheat, rock. Wood.
I haven't played that game in a long time. So that's what's going on here. And then we get to verse 29. And, Saul's thinking David's going to be killed by the Philistines. You need to kill 100 Philistines. He goes out and kills 200, no problem.
Yeah, and then he says, and Saul was yet the more afraid of David. He's like, who am I messing with here?
And Saul became David's enemy continually. That's an interesting phrasing of that. Became David's enemy. David became Saul's enemy, but it doesn't say it that way.
Yeah, and then verse 30 says, then the princes of the Philistines went forth, and it came to pass after they went forth that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was much set by.
Yeah.
Everyone knew who David was.
Yeah, buddy.
Why? Because he walked wisely. He was more wise than all the other servants. What a reputation. What a testimony,
So what do you do in this situation if you're Saul? You've got this guy. You feel he's undermining you. Though, God's hand is on him.
Yeah, it says that.
And he's fearful of this. He tried to get him killed.
He's probably hearing Samuel's voice, too, in the back of his head. Like, God is away from you.
Yeah.
And then he's seeing David, and he
knows.
Just cannot handle it.
Yeah, he knows, if I can get rid of this dude, then maybe I can keep my kingdom. And as we go into chapters 19 and as we continue on, we're going to see, and this is modern day politics, this is big politics have always worked, he is going to try to destroy reputation, he's going to get him on the run, and we see David being, not tortured, that's not the right word, but being abused.
Yeah.
And with it, that's an interesting thing. God is doing multiple things in this. You'll see he's going to be, I'm stealing away from next week, but he's...
It's a sneak peek.
Yeah, there you go. He'll be, by doing this, he's preparing Israel's heart for a new king, pointing them to God, because Saul was not pointing them to God anymore. He's preparing a young man's heart in David to be the king that he needs to be. And he is disciplining Saul. And he's doing all these, plus many more things. He's preparing an army of deeply, deeply committed men around David, that his mighty men that he'll need the rest of his kingdom. And all of this, if he'd have just become king, it wouldn't have been there. So God is using this situation, a very bad situation for David, and God is going to use this for his glory and to bring people to him. So with that, we will get to chapter 19 next week.
Yes.
All right.
All right, so now we are going to be switching over to some church history, some 2nd century history with Baptists and with
just the church, church in general.
Just kind of, I'll let you explain it.
So we have the apostles that are now off the scene. We are seeing those that were closest to the apostles. They're now at the end of their life or going off the scene. So we're now really in the third and fourth generation as we go into the 2nd century. So we're 100 to 200 AD. Persecution in that century is very high. You have 1, 2, 3, I think 4. Yeah, there's 6 different Caesars during that century that rule. Some of them torture Christians, use them as a pawn. One of them actually becomes a Christian, and there's a time of a bit of a brief respite there. But we see here there are 3 things that help the church continues to grow, Christianity continues to spread. One, because there was a persistent preaching. The churches, they took evangelizing seriously, as it should always. It wasn't just a belief or an opinion. This was their conviction in the Word of God, that the gospel was very exclusive. They were preaching the gospel very exclusive. It wasn't just another of many religions. It was the message that Jesus Christ is the only way. And then there was also the congregational life where they lived out the gospel. They practiced what they preached. So this is what sort of helped the church to grow as the Lord worked through them. As I mentioned, this was a period of extreme violence during this time.
Yeah,
go ahead.
You can read some of the crazy stuff that was going on. We've kind of talked about it before, whether they were the scapegoats with a bunch of stuff. They were the ones that were the targets of mobs. They were the targets of like extreme violence, where
everything was blamed on them, just as the Jews through time, things have been blamed on the Jews.
Yeah, they were the punching bag.
Yeah, we're told here. Got some notes here that said, they were decapitated, crucifixion, burning, scourging to death, all kinds of cruel types of punishment. Well, there started to happen some changes in the church at this time that is now moving the church to some of the things that we see today that weren't part of those distinctives that we talked about last week. The first one, and John warns of this when he's speaking of the 7 churches in Revelation, a term called sacerdotalism. Sacerdotalism, sacred, that type of word, is a word relating to a hierarchy that starts to build in the church, where it's relating to priestly hierarchy that begins. We start to see this subtle division in God's people to where there's different classes within the church. That's not supposed to be. As a pastor, I'm one of the church. God has given me some leadership roles in the church, just as he has deacons and different folks in our church, but I'm part of the church. Yeah. There's no division there where there's clergy and laity.
It's not your church.
Yeah. Right. Even when we say, I've got a friend's church, that's, Brother Stephen's church or something like that. I'm just saying that because he's the biggest one to identify with it. But there's really not this, a clergy and a laity. Those words start to show up in this century. Not before, they start to show up in this century. Like there's these chosen people that are supposed to be priests and laity. 1 Peter 5:3, he tells us to not do this, to prevent this, neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being examples to the flock. We're not supposed to be above and, controlling. We're supposed to be examples. Christ goes, this is the last example he shows to the apostles, is he puts that robe on and he kneels down and he washes their feet. That's an example, and not, we're supposed to be servants, right?
You're not looking down, commanding things. You are leading them. You're showing them the example and leading them toward who
Correct.
Christ is. You're not. It's
And I'm sure this could have happened easily, but it feeds into the flesh of us as people. There's most likely, it's going to be, you're going to have somebody that, they have a personality. There's some charisma there because they're a good speaker, possibly, or there's they've done something to stand up for the church, so now they've become a hero. And we see that in churches today, where unfortunately, you were talking about that podcast where that nobody questioned that guy because there was this bit of a hero status that he had. Yeah. And that happens, I think. And what happens here is we start to see this development and they didn't stop it. They continued. And you also see then the appeal of Judaism that we've talked about many times, where the Old Testament model, where you've got the Levitical priesthood, starts to creep its way back in, because there's power that comes with that over others, and there's a level of prestige. Here's a comment from Schaaf. He says, the idea and institution of a special priesthood distinct from the body of the people, with the accompanying notion of sacrifice and altar, passed imperceptibly from Jewish and heathen remnants and analogies into the Christian church. So the pagan churches that are coming in, they also have this priesthood, because that's a pretty consistent thing across religions. And that's not how God would have it to be. And we see it in 117 AD, 110 AD, different people of the church fathers starting to lean that way a little bit. Ignatius and Clement of Rome. So the first thing's there. The next problem that we start to see, these all start with S, is the sophistication, or what?
Sophistication.
Did I say it right?
I don't know. It
sounded wrong?
Sounded wrong.
All right. This is, so we have symbols, right?
Muddying the water.
Yeah.
For no reason.
Correct. We have, in our church, we have a wooden cross that's up there. Before then, it was an acrylic cross.
I had never thought about this, but
Now, this is a big deal between, later on we're going to see this. This is a big deal between the Roman Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox Church. The Greek, where they'll have statues and things of that nature in the Roman Catholic Church, where they will not have that in the Greek Church. But they will have icons, and they're painted instead of,
Yeah.
But what happens here is these images start to get introduced as a means of teaching truth. When we were on that Footsteps of Paul trip, we were at St. Mark's Cathedral, and when you looked up on the ceiling of St. Mark's Cathedral, it was the Bible account of creation, it was the Bible account of Noah, and the guide was telling us, well, this was painted on the ceiling because the majority of the people did not read at the time, and they could tell the story in pictures. I understand that.
Yeah.
We have picture books, we have picture Bibles for kids, those types of things. But what happens is we start to shift from, it becomes Moses's staff, or the brazen snake, where the people started worshiping the brazen snake. And we have seen this now come about. The sign of the cross started to get used in this century. Tertullian found it necessary to defend Christians against the accusation of cross worship. I see that today, where people are looking and they're praying to a cross.
You're worshiping the symbol and not what the symbol is representing.
Right. So we start to see all kinds of symbols come out during this time. The dove, I'd never heard this one. A ship, an anchor, those all make sense. The famous one of the fish, where, how do you pronounce that? Ichthus?
I don't know.
Where each letter inside the fish, Jesus Christ, God, Son, the Savior, they all have that representation there. So we start to see that come in, and with the sacerdotalism and the hierarchy, and then the big one, I think.
Well,
go ahead.
It's the sophistication of that is you're just with all these things. It's not just we're. I'm talking like
them.
Those back then.
Yeah.
They, like we were saying, they were adding stuff to it instead of just worshiping Christ. It was a sophistication of it because it should just be about Jesus Christ.
Simple gospel.
Yeah,
yes.
How simple it is. And we talk about that all the time, how simple it is, and that's a great part of it. But with these symbols, okay, you got the dove, you got the ship, you got the anchor, you got the fish, you have all these different things that are coming in. Okay, you come in and you're
confusing.
And then,
yeah,
and it confuses you, and now you have 10 different things that you're looking at instead of the one that actually matters. So
that's a good explanation of it. The last one I'll mention today is the sacramentalism, the sacrament. So the term sacrament originally referred to the badge that was given to a Roman soldier when they enlisted. So it was the sacrament. That was the symbol that identified them as part of the Roman army. What's baptism for us? It is a symbol of the relationship we have with Jesus Christ. And so we have here Tertullian, he likens the act of baptism to receiving this badge. That's a pretty good comparison. I could see a guy using that in a sermon. I mean, that's a pretty good analogy. But what happens is it slowly becomes synonymous with baptism.
The sacrament.
Right, the sacrament. And instead of identifying that I got baptized to identify with Christ because of something that's already happened inside of me, my salvation, it starts to be synonymous with the way to Christ. Not with him, but to him. And that becomes that becomes a different gospel.
Yeah.
Right? That's a different thing. And it starts to, and sacraments then become a means of grace, which it was never meant to be. And instead of, here's a good way of, I'll quote this guy, the scriptural balance between the substance and the symbol of salvation begin to change. The substance of salvation is Christ, his death, burial, and resurrection. The symbol was baptism. So we start to see this. They start to add things to the ceremony of baptism. We see where in some reciting of creeds, baptizing 3 times, all kinds of weird things there. And it starts to become a confusion with this. In fact, we start to see as early as the middle of the century, Justin Martyr, he starts saying that the baptismal bath is called also illumination because those who receive it are enlightened in its understanding. Hermas begins to talk about it as well. There is no other repentance than this, that we go down into the water and receive the forgiveness of our past sins. So we ask the question, well, if people are confusing it this early, maybe it is part of salvation. But that's not what we see. That's not what we see in Scripture. That's not what we see the apostles. And then we see other men like Tertullian said, we are not washed in order that we may cease from cleansing, the same time frame, but because we have already been washed in heart. So they're already having this us in the Church of Christ type or the Christian church type argument where they're saying it's part of salvation. We're saying it's the symbol of salvation. And so it's interesting to me that this conversation's already going on.
Yeah.
Another point, though, in either case is even the people that are arguing for it, they're still arguing that they're still showing that all the baptisms are only of adults. They're not of infants, is the point. They're only of people that have placed their faith in Christ. So there's something to learn, at least in that part, that we can take forward in the next as we go into the next centuries. So the sacerdotalism, where the hierarchy starts to creep in, the sacrament starts to creep in, and then the talking of the icons and that type of thing as well. So something to learn for this week as we look at church history, and we see that things never change. They just continue to cycle around the same things. So, all right. Anything you want to add? Or
No.
That's exciting to me. I know that's not something you would talk about all the time, but interesting.
That's why we're doing it here.
That's right. Got one for me?
Math is hard.
It is?
15 plus 15 is 30.
Yeah.
but 16 plus 16 is 32. Thank you, Uncle Rod, for that one. He's been sending
We're cutting him off.
His are so good. They make you moan and groan. That's the point.
That's good. Well, you guys have a great week. Thanks for joining us again. Hey, tell a friend about this as well. We'd love for more people to learn about this. We're sort of hidden there within our Facebook page. Share it with a friend, maybe someone outside of friendship as well. We'd love to see an opportunity to reach others with the Word of God and with the gospel. So have a good week. Love you guys. Bye.